Gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, everyone, especially to our instructor, Dr. Dennis Bilicura. This is my task number 4 about the current issues or problem of the country I chosen. First, let's tackle about China. Chinese president called for accelerating the building of a world-class military while touting the fight against COVID-19 as he kicked off a Communist Party Congress by focusing heavily on security and reiterating policy priorities. The dominant features of Chinese politics in this decade has been the rise of Xi Jinping, the return of repressive autocracy, and an explosive effort to engineering Chinese economic model. Chinese middle class has expanded unmercilessly, but the Chinese Communist Party has yet to find a political model that can accommodate this new educated urban majority's aspiration for greater participation in government decision making. The major trends in China's national security situation over this period has been more ambitious role for China in global governance, worsening relations in the most neighbors, strengthening ties with Russia, and escalating rivalry with the United States. China now finds itself less confident internally and in markedly less peaceful international environment than before. Foreign views of China has been shifted to, and not in by, variable in Beijing. The Chinese Communist Party has lost its previous reputation for superhuman competence in managing economic affairs. China's political system has become even less attractive than before, with significant implication for its eventual integration of outlying parts of the Chinese Commonwealth, like Hong Kong. After a quarter century in which its domestic and foreign affairs trajectories seem relatively predictable and unchanging to Chinese and foreigners alike, China is back to the future of multiplying uncertainties and potential crises. The reconciliation of Taiwan with the China mainland is once again the danger of cross-strait conflict is no longer risking. A brief flap of abuses of the capital's privilege. The anti-corruption campaign has killed tigers, swat flies, intimidated Chinese officials in unsettled entrepreneurs. Perceptions of heightened political risk now inhibit deal-making and exert the slowdown of Chinese economy. Many of the Chinese wealthy are hurting by shifting part of the world abroad. This is a formidable list of challenges. Beijing's handle of them has been uneven at best. Some of what it has done has been not just inadequate but counterproductive. Still, to say that China has brought many of its problems on itself too simplistic. Overcoming these challenges will require diplomatic imagination. It will always demand a flexible approach to rejuvenating the world's investment in financial systems. Neither imagination nor flexibility is much in evidence in Beijing are completing capitals these days. The failure to engage with the Chinese in defining the concept of multipolar relation, American advantage must now be seen as a major loss for such engagement might enable the United States to stipulate principles for the future development of a relationship with an ever more powerful China. Managing China's rise will require striking a precarious balance between rivalry, competition, and partnership with solving problems. Things are not likely to get easier between the United States and the China anytime soon. The United States is now committed to deploy its armed forces to counter China's power and to fend off Chinese intrusion into a sphere of influence in Asia that America has policed since World War II. Not content with back existing allies, Americans is inventing new ones like Vietnam, whose maritime sea defense against China. In effect, U.S. forces has been placed on call to initiate combat with the People's Liberation Army, Navy, and Air Force whenever Tokyo, Manila, and Hyundai decide they should. And if fight breaks out, no one has a clue how to keep it from escalating. War between the United States and China, both nuclear powers, was once hard to imagine. We now appear to be heading in the direction of some sort of eventual standoff with nuclear characteristics. If we are lucky, when it occurs, it will end without military or civilian casualties on either side, as the combat missile crisis did. But relying on luck to avert catastrophe and unwise, it should not be acceptable to Americans, Chinese, Asian peoples caught in the middle between China and America. China's President Xi Jinping signaled there would be no immediate losing of his controversial zero-COVID strategy as historic Communist Party Congress opened in Beijing. In a break in decades-long tradition, delegates are like a hand of Mr. Xi a third term as a party chief. The zero-COVID was a people's war to stop the spread of virus, he said. The policy will save lives but also exacted a punishing toll on the Chinese people economy. There is increasing public fatigue over lockdowns and travel restrictions. Beijing has come under strict security measures against the Congress sparkle of frustration in the city with a rare dramatic public protest on Thursday criticizing Mr. Xi and zero COVID-19. Now, let's go on in the country Vietnam. Nearly 50 years since the end of the Vietnam War and more than a quarter century since the normalization of US Vietnam relations, Vietnam is emerging as a rising power of the heart of the specific region and increasingly important US partner. Once one of the world's poorest and most isolated country, Vietnam is now a middle-income country with a dynamic young population and a promising future. Since joining ASEAN in 1977, Vietnam has played a significant role in regional diplomatic and development. Vietnam's foreign policy aims to act a friend and reliable partner of countries in the international community. Vietnam has established strategic partners with Japan, China, India, Russia, and other countries. The United States and Vietnam agreed on a comprehensive partnership in 2013 that is strategic in all but name, including cooperation on economic, security, and educational, cultural, and war legal issues. Vietnam's policy of a multiple partnership has remained intact despite of maritime security challenges in the East China Sea and the USEP War Legacies and Reconciliation Initiative. The U.S. Institute of Peace engages in research and dialogue examining the extraordinary arc of the U.S. Vietnam relations. In August 2021, USEP launched a multi-year project to foster public education as well as government-to-government and people-to-people dialogue among Vietnamese and Americans, addressing war legacies including Agent Orange, exploding bombs, and recovery of wartime remains is an essential component of the wider work of building a strong bilateral partnership. USEP initiatives stem from Congress landmark authorization in 2021 for the U.S. government assist Vietnam in identification its war dead. In following decades, Vietnamese cooperates to help United States conduct a fullest possible counting of U.S. personnel, and USEP project aims to further advance reconciliation, to sustain U.S. support in addressing war legacies, and to highlight lessons from U.S. and Vietnam experience that could apply elsewhere in the world. Currently, Vietnam ranks 4th globally with the highest rate of plastic waste at 1.83 billion tons per year, while water pollution is expected to cost country 3.5% of its GDP by 2035, according to World Bank. Learning from U.S.-Vietnam cooperation on wartime remains recovery, how Vietnamese and Americans are working together to account for missing personnel from Vietnam War. The event features governmental and non-government speakers from both countries, including defense. According to agencies, Dr. Kelly McCaig and Vietnamese Deputy Ambassador Wang Tha Nga. And now,
Why
let's
Vietnam
go
is
on
still
to the
poor.
Philippines.
There are
I
no
have here
simple,
10
straightforward
issues in the
answers as to why some
Philippines in the
countries are
world
poor.
today.
There are many
As we
factors
all
that come
know,
into
social
play as to their
issues
poor
is a
state,
problem
and some
that
are controversial,
influences many
but nonetheless
citizens
factual.
within a society.
When looking at different nations of the world,
these
economists
are the
use gross
problems
domestic
that
product
many
(GDP) per
Filipino
capita as an
faces.
indicator of a country's economic
I
well-being.
have here the top 10
GDP is the
issues
total
that
market value
encounter
of all final
the
goods and
Philippines today.
services that a
First
particular economy
is
produces
the
in a year.
poverty.
To become a
As we all
high-income
know, the
country by
poverty,
2045,
and according
Vietnam needs to sustain
to
average growth
the
rates of at least
SWA survey,
7% in the years ahead.
2.2 million
While the country
Filipinos
has the
suffer
means to do this,
from
without
poverty.
reform, it will
And
just slow
one
down
I
and
am
remain
and we
poor.
and one
Vietnam,
of them
many
is
living below
our
the poverty
family.
line.
This
When you divide a
problem
country's
that
GDP by
until
its
now,
population, you get an
wala
idea of how
pagyapon
much income,
na
on
so
average,
far.
the economy
Many
produces for
Filipinos
each
suffer
person
from
each
this
year.
situation.
GDP is a measure of a nation's standard of living. It's interesting to note, however, that some developing countries have a higher GDP than developed countries. A country is thought to be poor if its people don't have a certain living standard. There are many people in Vietnam who don't have a good living standard. Just how poor is this Southeast Asian country on the South China Sea? Should the country be poor, seeing that it has a long coastline with top-notch harbours, as well as a vibrant tourism industry? Poverty. Half of Vietnam's population among ethnic minorities still live below the poverty line. People from these ethnic minority backgrounds are isolated, not only geographically, but socially too. The government has at least tried to address this problem, and they instituted their CIMA Committee, Committee for Ethnic Minority and Mountainous Area Affairs. They want to work to improve education as well as social opportunities for this particular population. Vietnam is a very populous country with close to 100 million people, but a good percentage of the people live in poverty. Factors that have contributed to poverty include large families, even when parents are unemployed. This is one of the controversial topics that people don't like to address, but which is a stark reality. Then there is also a lack of education and lack of skills. Based on the drop in the country's poverty rate between the years 2010 and 2014, conditions in the nation definitely improved. However, issues such as poor education system, a poor and deteriorating infrastructure, as well as ethnic discrimination, is still threatening its growth in 2019. Mismanagement of funds. The United States has been strategizing with Vietnam, the idea being to transform the country into a more sustainable developing one. To this end, a 5-year plan was developed in 2014. Millions of dollars have been allocated to improve not only trade, but to also develop higher education. In fact, the country has set Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, achievable by 2030. These are goals to improve the healthcare system, tackle issues of equality, and improve the country's poverty rate. These seem like good plans to pull Vietnam out of poverty, so why is Vietnam still poor? Where is all the financial help and transformation efforts going? It's not as though there wasn't an improvement, but in spite of some true successes for Vietnam, poverty remains an issue. Resisting Western influence. There are political experts who believe that Vietnam is still poor because they resisted Western influence in the 19th century. It's still having negative repercussions. Their resistance to this influence caused the country to fall behind advanced countries, becoming prey for imperialist powers. No infrastructure, no private sector growth. Failing infrastructure, though, still remains one of the reasons that the country remains poor. Efforts have been made to bring electricity to everyone, but their infrastructure systems for water, sanitation, energy and telecommunication is still not good, and the private sector can't grow. The government's approach to infrastructure development hasn't been driven, and some small developments have scarcely made a difference. What the government needs to do is to accelerate productive investment, to boost the productivity of the country's huge labour force with investment in infrastructure, machinery and technology. Of course, it will require a more efficient financial system. The country's socio-economic development strategy for 2016-2020 acknowledges these problems as reasons why the country can't rise out of its poverty. It does, however, seem to realise the need to change things and accelerate progress. Corruption in high places. Many people say that the country's infrastructure is lacking because of corruption within Vietnam's leadership. They reckon that Vietnam's government is corrupt. When you look at the Corruption Perceptions Index world, Vietnam doesn't rank well. All the money supposed to be going towards healthcare, education and infrastructure is going straight into the pockets of many government officials. They make business deals that benefit them but cause damage to the state budget and also damage to the economy. The sad reality is that Vietnam's actual quality of life isn't poor because its people are uneducated or lazy. No, most Vietnamese are hard-working, aspirational people who want a decent life for themselves and their families. But they have to contend with their corrupt government. They should be demanding accountability from these people. Natural hazards. Unfortunately, if it's not the government, the country also has its fair share of natural hazards such as flooding. The country has a super long coastline, 3,200 kilometers long, and most of its population lives in coastal areas and low-lying deltas. The country is also heavily exposed to climate change, and this is expected to increase sea levels and coastal flooding. Flooding causes major problems in Vietnam, and this natural disaster increases poverty. Poor people often take longer to recover from a flood because of no insurance and limited or no borrowing capacity. Government is supposed to offer support after a flood, but this is often inadequate to support losses. A turbulent past. Decades of war between 1945 and 1975 have taken their toll on the country for sure, and until 1989, much of the government's resources went into the occupation of Cambodia and a border war with China. Vietnam was both politically and economically isolated from countries such as China and the USA, keeping a trade embargo in place. A process of reform began, but trade with America and neighbouring countries only started really in 1994. By then, Vietnam's economy was in a mess. Vietnam has enjoyed growth in the reform era from 1994 till now, and it is perhaps not ranked as one of the world's poorest countries anymore, but mismanagement and corruption in high places may well ensure that this country doesn't move up to where it belongs.
Second is healthcare. As we all know, we are suffering from COVID-19 pandemic, and this pandemic really affects many Filipino people in different ways. Most infected people will develop mild to moderate illness. From the world data, total in the Philippines, we have the cases for the total of 3.98 million, and we have the deaths 63,510,000. The third is unemployment and underemployment. As reported by the Philippine Statistics Authority today, the country decreased to 5.2% in July 2022 from 7.2% in the same period. As we all know, many Filipino peoples take the opportunity to work in the other country than to work in here in the Philippines. As we all know that the financial situation in our country is very very poor or low, unlike in the other country that we are not suffering from financial problems, but our health really affects us. and that is the issues or the problems that we encounter right now. The third is unemployment and underemployment. As reported by the Philippine Statistics Authority today, the country decreased to 5.2% in July 2022 from 7.2% in the same period. As we all know, many Filipino peoples take the opportunity to work in the other country than to work in here in the Philippines. As we all know that the financial situation in our country is very very poor or low, unlike in the other country that we are not suffering from financial problems, but our health really affects us, and that is the issues or the problems that we encounter right now. Okay, next is crime. As of February 2022, about 27.2 thousand crime incidents were recorded in the Philippines, about 7,000 of which were reported in the National Capital Region, over 4,000 incidents from Region 4E. Crime incidents include both focused and unfocused crimes. Next one is graft and corruption. In 1988, crime and corruption in the Philippines was considered as the biggest problem of all by James Corden Saint, the Archbishop of Manila. In 1989, public's perception that was corrupt government officials and leaders threatened to the country that the communist guerrillas. In 1992, President Ramos considered graft and corruption as a major hindrance to succeeding his development strategy for the country. In 1988, the country got good marks from Transparency International and most of the studies and the survey shows that the Philippines is one of the most corrupt countries with many crimes overlooked in the media. These reports painted an image of a corrupt country and a government seemingly powerless over corruption. The most prominent of this agency was regularly conducts studies of corruptions in the Philippines. Next is deprivation of basic services. Filipino children are still focusing on multiple and deep-rooting in deprivations and vulnerabilities in their survival, development, protection, and participation according to the latest based on gathered in 2017 launch by the UNICEF. The eighth is drug dependency. The prevalence of illegal drugs in the Philippines is indeed apparently determined, however, estimates by the short population of marijuana is 2.5%. Amphetamine type stimulates 2.8%, and ecstasy 0.1% of the population over 15 years of age. Next is rapid population growth. From 1960 to 2021, the population of the Philippines increases from 26.27 million to 111.05 million people. This is a growth of 322.7% in 61 years. The highest increase in the Philippines was recorded in 1961 with 3.34%. The smallest increase in 2021 with 1.34%. And the last is environmental degradation. Today, environmental problems in the Philippines include population, illegal mining and logging, deforestation trends to environmental activities, dynamic fishing, landslides, coastal erosion, biodiversity loss, extinction, global warming, and climate change. Thank you so much for listening and watching.